for one final time in 2019, for one final time in the decade, welcome to a Formula 1 2019 qualifying review. And this time it's round 21, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Blimey, it feels like 2 seconds ago we were way back in Melbourne on the other side of the globe talking about Leclerc going to Ferrari, about rookies Norris, Russell, Giovinazzi, what were they all going to be able to do? And now it's the last race of the season. Last race weekend for the likes of Nico Hülkenberg potentially, Robert Kubica potentially. Lots to talk about, lots of emotion in this weekend, this last one, before the winter break. However, I think a nice just refresh, a nice reset button for next year, a complete clean slate for the championship. Not many driver transfers next year, just 2 of the teams aren't keeping the same lineup. But we had one final time to see the 2019 grid, and this is how the session finished. Lewis Hamilton, for only the 5th time in 2019, his first pole position since Germany. First pole position since the summer break. Blimey, it's been a mighty drought for the man who has the most pole positions in Formula 1 history, and it was another Mercedes 1-2 in Abu Dhabi. They have mastered this circuit since the hybrid era, since 2014, winning every single Grand Prix, most of them being 1-2s, and likewise with qualifying. Valtteri Bottas was P2, but will start the race all the way back in P20 thanks to engine penalties, which means Max Verstappen will be elevated onto the front row, and blimey, that is a juicy way to end the season with Hamilton and Verstappen on the front row, with the 2 Ferraris, Leclerc and Vettel, in behind. Then it's the 2 rookies, Albon and Norris, hoping to finish the season in a bit of style. Ricciardo, Sainz and Hülkenberg round out the top 10. Moving into the bottom half, Sergio Perez and Pierre Gasly putting themselves on that alternate strategy. Well, they might not, but it's very likely that they will do, starting on brand new tyres. I expect them to have quite a big impact in the race. Gasly, of course, picking up his first ever Formula 1 podium last time out in Brazil. Not too sure that that's going to happen again this time, but you never say never in Formula 1. Lance Stroll making it through to Q2, headed by Danny Kvyat. That's not a bad job from Stroll whatsoever. And our final runner in Q2 was Kevin Magnussen, quite a way off in P15. His Haas teammate Romain Grosjean out in Q1, testing a new floor, which actually was their floor they used in winter testing, yes. It's really not been a brilliant season for Haas, and both drivers, I think, will be just looking forward to just getting rid of this car as quickly as possible. The 2 Alphas, Giovinazzi in 17th, Raikkonen P18, and as always, it's not got any better at the end of 2019. The 2 Williams, this man George Russell in P19, and his teammate Robert Kubica in P20. Right, that's your 20, that's your order for the final grid of the year. And as I've done quite a few times this season, I'm going to start with good old Robbo and end with Lewis Hamilton. Right, Robbo Kubica. Actually, while I'm here, I might as well say that, just to give you a quick update on the winter and my winter plans, I'm going to do a video every single day from December 1st to Christmas Day. Not because I'm trying to do, give myself too much work or anything like that and exhaust myself, but I'm going to do exactly what I did in the summer, and each day do a 5 to 10 minute video, kind of doing each single driver end of year review. So exactly like I did for our mid-season reviews, but end of year review. So of course I will talk about guys like good old Robbo, Nico Hülkenberg in a little bit more detail in those videos, but this could be, both of them, their last ever session in Formula 1. And poor Robert Kubica, it's been a pretty... that was going to be an understatement there. It's been an awful car that he has had to drive throughout 2019. And once again, was beaten by teammate George Russell, which means George Russell is the only driver on the grid, and just like Fernando Alonso did to Stoffel Van Dorn last year, got a complete clean sweep in 2019, 21-0 to George Russell. And yes, there's been some interesting rumours about the team favouring George Russell, about them not giving Kubica a good enough car. Again, we'll talk about that after the season, because even though for Robert, this hasn't been the return he wanted, it's still an incredible comeback. And for George Russell, someone who probably would argue dominated last year in Formula 2, it's not been the dream year in his step up to Formula 1, but that's just a little nugget he can take away from the year and say, look, at least I was able to do that, got this brilliant record in qualifying, and wasn't a million miles away, actually, from the two Alfa Romeos, Raikkonen and Giovinazzi. It's not been a brilliant few weekends for the team in qualifying. In the race, of course, last time out, P4 and P5, thanks to the carnage. That was the Brazilian Grand Prix. But apart from that, Raikkonen hasn't scored in the second half of the year. Giovinazzi's picked up a few points, but it's been a difficult second half of the year for Alfa. Another team a little bit like Haas that are just in front of them that are just kind of hoping that this season just trickles out in as easy kind of fashion as possible. Maybe pick up some points, but it's been a tough end to the season for Alfa Romeo. In front of those two, Romain Grosjean P16, Kevin Magnussen P15. Like most of these guys, will move one place forward thanks to Valtteri Bottas. For Romain, out in Q1. And actually, they put up the head-to-head statistics between these two boys, and it was much closer than I thought, actually. But Romain was the one losing out this time round. Obviously made contact with Valtteri Bottas during practice. I'll save my judgment on that one, but it's FP2, boys. You know, come on, at the end of the day, we shouldn't be having to have dramas like that in second practice. Anyway, there were more dramas in qualifying for Romain in his first flying lap. A little twitcheroo coming out the final corner, but just held it. Pretty cool, actually, rally-style save from Romain. Had that mini incident with Danny Kvyat coming out of his pit box. Didn't affect his lap times whatsoever, but he was still a little bit agitated, as all drivers are in those kind of situations. But trialling that floor they used in winter testing, you know when you hear that. Before a weekend starts, they're reverting to the car they used in testing. It's not a good sign. The pace was looking there, actually, in practice, and I thought, my God, if their winter testing car's better than their race car they've used all year, what a joke they're going to look like. But it was very close between the two of them, which even in itself isn't brilliant. Improvement in that car has just been all over the place. Yeah, as I said a minute ago, they're just so ready just to sit back, sit back and have a relax over the winter, but there's lots to do for the Haas team, and for a team that almost got fourth last year in the Constructors, they're a country mile off P8. They're sat comfortably in P9 at the moment, and I think K-Mag's put it very well this weekend so far in interviews. It's a year of learning. It's definitely a year of learning. That's how the team have to see it. But P15 and 16 will start the race. P14 and 15, yeah, not ideal for the team. In front of them, Danny Kvyat, who is using his Russian Grand Prix special helmet. He wasn't allowed to use it in Russia because he asked the FIA, was he allowed to change? They didn't allow it. But for other drivers, they had it. All got a little bit messy. Aldas did a good video on it, talking about that kind of situation. But basically, he's got around it by just not telling them and just showing up to the weekend using it, which I thought was quite funny. But the pace didn't quite seem to be there. Clonked the curb quite heavily during his run in qualifying 2. A couple of places behind his teammate Pierre Gasly, but not a million miles away. Both Toro Rossos were actually split by the racing point of Lance Stroll. We don't see him many times through to Q2, but I think in the second half of the year, that car definitely seems to be, found a little bit more pace, and both drivers seem to be getting better and better results. Stroll, this is one of his best qualifying results of the year, always through to Q3. Is that the statistic, or is it never out in Q1? It's never out in Q1, definitely. That's the statistic. Almost messed up there. But yes, never out in Q1, always through to at least Q2 at this circuit, and that trend continues. It seems to be a place that Lance quite likes. Behind his teammate again, but hey, with that alternate strategy tomorrow, definitely don't count him out. Usually very good at starting races. Pierre Gasly, P12, in that very heated battle for 5th in the standings. Really interested to see what he and Sergio Perez can do in that midfield tomorrow. I expect them to go forward quite a fair chunk in the race. Moving on through to the top 10, this is where the juicy bit kind of starts. Nico Hülkenberg, what could be his last ever Formula 1 qualifying session. They just caught him as he left the garage, and I thought, that gets you in the feels just a little bit. It really did. I think he'll be back. I think he's definitely good enough to be back. Squidging through into Q3, just behind the likes of Sainz and Ricciardo. Isn't an awful day from Hülkenberg. That car, very wishy-washy in terms of if it has pace, if it doesn't have pace. bit all over the place, but P10, okay. Strategy, perhaps a little bit questionable for tomorrow, and I expect the likes of Perez and Gasly to get by, but I think it would be a just end to the season and perhaps his career if he can just squidge a point at the end of the race. In front of him, P9, Carlos Sainz, a bit of a surprise actually. Carlos Sainz down in P9, didn't have a clean run, actually just setting up his final run was a little bit messy, being passed by the two Mercedes cars, didn't get the tow for Norris that they had kind of planned, although the tow itself didn't make a fat lot of difference. But even then, didn't get the tyres in the right zone, ultimately didn't really do a representative lap at the end of the session, and ultimately loses to Norris in the head-to-head battle, and Sainz had been doing so well, had out-qualified Norris in 5 of the last 6, so just couldn't quite get it over at the end. But Norris, a little bit of, I suppose, justification for those early, really impressive qualifying performances. The two McLarens were split by Ricciardo. Quite a bit of the grid, actually, was split by one or two, in a sandwich, if you want to say, by a few of the teams. But Ricciardo will start the race P7 tomorrow. Always race. He had a fantastic first few laps with Norris last time out in Brazil. Both of them ultimately not quite having the race that others potentially did have and squidging onto the podium, but Ricciardo and Norris always put on a show, always do well in qualifying together. So for both of those two drivers, I think this is a pretty consistent way for the season. I think all of Sainz, Ricciardo and Norris, all three of them seem to be fighting over best of the rest in this second half of the year. So I'm expecting a good race tomorrow from those three. I expect them all to be right there fighting, but for Norris and Ricciardo, it's just about picking up, what is it, so 6th, 7th, 9th, is it probably the best that they can do this weekend? Getting into that top 10, I suppose, overall will be the goal for those boys. But Sainz as well, I just want to pick up on it quickly as we go into P6, Alex Albon. That fight for P5 is P6 even, P6. Don't get ahead of myself. Fight for P6. I think I said 5 earlier. Apologies. Fight for P6. Albon, Gasly and Sainz. Albon just a bit behind Gasly and Sainz, who are both tied on 95 points. Even the thought that a McLaren driver could potentially score over 100 points is insane. But the fact that Sainz could quite easily, well, I say quite easily, I think it's a 30-30-30 kind of chance between all three of them, to be totally honest with you. Albon has a bit of a gap behind, but of course he's the most likely to score big points. Sainz will start in the top 10, will start P8, very easily could move to the top of that best of the rest queue if Norris and Ricciardo don't have the best first few laps. Gasly on the alternate strategy, so I'm really looking forward to that battle tomorrow. If I'm going to put money on it today and be a little bit brave, I think Albon's definitely going to be in the driving seat. He's not a million points behind. Sainz, I'm not too sure about his strategy, and actually, I think what could undo it for the likes of Gasly and Sainz is the two racing point cars. I think they could be the ones to watch in the race tomorrow, but for sure, it's going to be a fun one. Albon's doing an Albon, P6, again, in that battle for P5. In front of Albon, Sebastian Vettel. A bit of a spin once again for Seb in Q1 of all times. Not the best of manoeuvres from Seb, not the best of performances, and actually never really got in a fantastic lap to seize the opportunity to get in front of Leclerc or even be involved in a fight for pole position or that front row of the grid. So Sebastian, who I imagine is already a little bit tired after his chaotic weekend, having a third child, I believe it is, so congrats Seb. Yeah, just not swimming, not going too well at the end of the season, but hey, I'm sure they're all getting a little bit tired. Even I'm getting a little bit tired coming to the end of the season. So I understand a little bit, but not his best performance of the year, I think it's fair to say. P4, Charles Leclerc didn't get a run. Didn't get a run on the final goes in quali. Was it another mistake on Ferrari's behalf? Was it a mistake from Leclerc in the cockpit? Was it just how quali works in modern Formula 1? Trying to get the gap, trying to heat up your tyres. Whatever it is, it's fair to say, not Ferrari's cleanest performance. I mean, Crofty, I'm not too sure if this statistic is correct, but was saying that this is the first time since Hungary a Ferrari's not been in the front row in qualifying, which is A crazy statistic considering where they were in the first half of the year, considering the amount of actual victories that front row starts have been converted to. It's very much Ferrari 2019 was their qualifying today. I imagine the race tomorrow, something will go wrong. It always does with Ferrari. Another team. I feel that I'm just ready now just to say, look, that was our first year with a big managerial change, a new driver change. Hopefully we've got all the little nooks and crannies sorted out. 2020, is it their year? Probably not, knowing Ferrari. Anyway, we'll start tomorrow's race. P3 and P4, it's not the end of the world. Sector 3, though, not looking brilliant in their car. And that was really their Achilles heel, actually, this weekend. We're quick in Sector 1 and Sector 2. That straight line speed, which isn't quite what it used to be, just wasn't able to keep up with the performance of the Mercedes and the Red Bull in Sector 3. Tight and twisty section in front of the two Ferraris. Max Verstappen made that work, but not quite enough. It looked for... well, throughout most of the practice session, throughout the first two qualifying sessions and the first run in Q3, it was going to be Hamilton, Verstappen, then Bottas, if Bottas even did a run. Bottas did go for it and did eventually get in front of Verstappen, but Max looking quick. This isn't really a circuit I associate with being a brilliant one for the Red Bull cars, but although Mercedes did end up with 1-2, and are always quick here, I didn't expect the Red Bull to be as close as they actually were. And definitely we've seen in 2019 a clear picture that Red Bull, their race pace is definitely a lot closer than their qualifying pace. So I'm really looking forward to seeing another brilliant battle between Hamilton and Verstappen, especially in those first few laps. And with the Ferrari splitting their strategy, that'll come into play as well. Verstappen, you imagine, will be the lone gunner for Red Bull, depending on how quickly Albon can get up to speed. Was a little bit off the pace today, Alex Albon, so keep an eye out for that. But Max, we've seen what he can do in 2019. We've seen the damage he can do to his competitors while overtaking them, putting them under pressure. I'm looking forward to it. And actually, we'll start on the front row. So even though Bottas out-qualified him, Bottas, who, just to remind you again, will start at the very back thanks to engine penalties. Verstappen, I think, has got a good chance at this one. Hamilton as well will be a lone gunner. So I think we really could have a real interesting play for the undercuts tomorrow, trying to cover off the other Ferrari. I'm looking forward to it. And of course, your pole sitter for only the 5th time this year in 2019 equals his teammates' record of pole positions in 2019, Lewis Hamilton. A very Lewis Hamilton kind of feeling qualifying session, if you know what I mean. Very much top of the times, every single session, got the job done by a few tenths of a second. It just seems bizarre. It's the first one since Germany. A bit of fun, as we always do at the end of our qualifying reviews. Driver of the day and ones to watch. And if I'm totally honest, driver of the day, I didn't really have one. I didn't really have any, but considering Norris just beat out Sainz in the head-to-head, Russell got 21-0, and Hamilton got pole position, I thought I'd show some British bias and put those as my top 3. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below, because I really couldn't choose between a whole host of drivers. Today, most of them did a pretty good job, and most of them were where I expected. But ones to watch, of course, Valtteri Bottas, he qualified 2nd. He'll be working his way through the grid, starting from P20, if you didn't know. Carlos Sainz in that fight for the top 5, likewise with Pierre Gasly. I'm really looking forward to seeing those two. And once again, just to remind you, as we end off today's video, Hülkenberg and Kubica, this could be their last ever weekends in Formula 1. So, of course, I'm going to be keeping an eye on those boys with a tear in my eye, of course. Anyway, one last race to go tomorrow. Ladies and gents, make sure you're watching. Try not to cry if you're a big boy, unlike myself. But hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. If you are new around here, I know it's the end of the season, but we'll be covering Formula 1 over the winter, giving you your daily fix of Formula 1, or at least trying my best to do so. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you are new and you've made it this far. Blimey, if you've done that, well done to you. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow in the next one.